We're just going to give it a moment for everyone to log into our session and we'll get started momentarily. Good morning and welcome to WITA's second event in the past 24 hours. My name is Ken Levinson and I'm the Executive Director of WITA. Yesterday afternoon, we did a deep dive on US-EU relations with a lot of talk about China. And today we're pleased to be joined by an expert panel to discuss US trade with Central America and the immigration crisis at the US southern border. What these two events have in common is that both of them recognize the nexus between trade and US foreign policy and our national security interests. It's honestly a common theme in many of our events, including our series on trade and the environment, which continues next Tuesday afternoon. We're also pleased to announce a new event looking at President Biden's proposal for a global minimum tax. That event will be on Thursday, April 29th. Information on all our upcoming events and videos of our past events can be found at www.wita.org. Before we get to today's event, we want to welcome several people in our audience who you may not be able to see on Zoom, but who you are in community with nonetheless. So welcome today to Keith Schneller of the Almond Board of California, Ambassador Francisco Campbell of Nicaragua, Patricia Lopez of Gap Inc., Lynn Alfala of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Welcome, Keith, Francisco, Patricia, and Lynn, and welcome to all of you. We're, of course, also very pleased to welcome today's panel, which includes old friends and new. If you're watching this on Zoom, you should have received an event program with our panelists' biographies, so I won't go into lengthy introductions here. But welcome to the WITA stage to Patrick Ventrell, Director of the Office of Central American Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. Patrick's had a fascinating career as a Foreign Service officer, including several stints in several world capitals, at the National Security Council, and at the U.S. mission to the UN in New York. Maria Sierra, who started her career as a lawyer in Guatemala City and is now a policy advisor to U.S. Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. Matthew Rooney, the managing director of the Bush Center, who heads the Institute's Economic Growth Initiative after a career in as a Foreign Service officer, also at the U.S. Department of State. And welcome back to the WITA stage to Beth Hughes, who oversees the Trade Policy Committee at the American Apparel and Footwear Association, and my good friend and frequent partner at WITA, Kellie Meiman Hock, who runs a trade practice at McLarty Associates in Washington. Kellie's own journey as a Latin Americanist started as a student in Costa Rica, so this event brings her full circle. Kellie will be moderating today's discussion. If you're watching this on Zoom, you can ask questions using the Q&A tab on Zoom. We'll try to get to some of those towards the end of our session. Kellie?
Ken, thanks so much, and thanks to the panel. I really appreciate being included in this. And you're right, the more recent chapters of my career, I've spent more time on Brazil, but my journey did start studying both the then impending NAFTA negotiations, as well as Cold War policy in Central America. And it's just really a pleasure to be here with this group. You know, one of the things I think that really drew me originally to trade policy was that time that I spent in Central America and seeing the real need for economic development. And, you know, one of the things that I think we saw, and we'll hear more from our panelists here today, as a very positive knock-on effect of then NAFTA, was the fact that we were really encouraging economic development south of the border. And that was the vision with the original CAFTA 15 years ago as well. So I think this is a perfect time to really have an inflection point, look at where we are with CAFTA, where we are with our you know, journey of trying to encourage economic development in our hemisphere. And I'll rotate between our panelists, but hopefully have a good conversation here about the important elements involved in encouraging economic development in Central America and also obviously addressing the migration issues at the southern border. So Patrick, thanks for being with us. I'm going to start with you, and would just love to hear from you first off on what the Biden administration is seeking to do to holistically address the root causes of migration. What is what is the construct of the policy plan of the administration? Would love to hear from you on that.
Well, thanks so much, Kelly, and really pleased to be here today representing the State Department. Again, I'm the director of the Office of Central American Affairs here at the State Department. We're quite busy these days. Central America is a top priority for the new administration, and we're excited to be working closely with our colleagues in the interagency, with the Office of the Vice President, and with many others as we sort of intensify our efforts to try to really help with the situation in Central America. Quite frankly, the persistent instability and insecurity that we've seen is of great national importance to the United States. And I would say that includes obviously in the economic realm, in not only sort of stabilizing the economies, but quite frankly, driving job growth is a national security interest of the United States. And right now we're working on a comprehensive plan that looks at the root causes of that drives instability and drives migration. It's a complex series of causes, and we're not the first group to work on this, and not the first group in the U.S. government to work on this. But I think we're taking a fresh look. We're looking holistically, and I think there's been some look in the region too that we learned from some of what's been done before, as the U.S. government has taken comprehensive efforts in the past, and quite frankly, we're still not at a place, and we need to do more with all these countries. I'd say one of the most interesting things that we're looking at right now, and again, the plan, we're still, and I don't want to get ahead of the interagency, we're still developing the plan, we're still working, and we haven't quite announced our final strategy yet. But I mean, I think one of the really interesting things we're looking at right now is corruption and governance, and some of the actions that undermine transparency and judicial independence and efficiency is really some of the key drivers that are intertwined with so many other factors. Obviously, there are security factors or economic factors that may drive individual decisions to leave someone's home country, but it frequently ties back into those key governance issues. And so I think what we see when we're looking at the economies in these countries is that people want a level playing field. They want a predictable playing field. They want the ease of starting a business, dealing with some of the technical aspects of economic development. But at the end of the day, they want to know that their governments, that there is a sort of fair and free playing field. And I think that relates to security too. There are elements where if you have corrupted police forces or other problems there, that also sort of underpin some of the problems. So I think that's been one of the key insights, one of the things that we're working the hardest on. But again, we are looking at governance, we're looking at security, we're looking at the economy, and looking at them holistically across them and across the different countries. Each of these countries is a little bit different, has a little bit different set of factors that are intertwined. I mean, right now we've also had not only the COVID pandemic, but multiple hurricanes that have hit. And that have driven growing food insecurity and a really precarious economic situation. And so I think that really drives some of how we're looking at this right now.
No, absolutely. And also climate change, right? I mean, I know a lot of
the
coffee farmers now can't, necessarily lean on those previously planted crops. So now it makes a ton of sense. I mean, it strikes me that it's almost like a three-legged stool, right? I mean, you've got, you highlighted governance and transparency, rule of law, you've got security, you've got the economic growth and job growth perspective there. I mean, and then also just, and I know this isn't state, it's more a DHS play, but just the processing of asylum and refugee seekers, all contributing to creating a more stable environment. And without getting, as you say, too out in front of the interagency, I mean, which of those aspects do you see as kind of providing the most opportunity and the most challenge? Understanding that it will be different country by country, and that the politics in Central America are not uncomplicated right now.
Yeah, no, look, there are tremendous challenges and tremendous opportunities. I think what I'd say is, part of this plan is going to be to drive more foreign assistance. And some of that involves technical capacity, and whether it's in the security space, what we're doing to help improve their police function, or whether what we're doing with USAID to try to drive again, some of better governance or better institutions or improve their ability to collect taxes, all of those things. But I think one of the things we've heard as we consulted with the private sector and our initial consultations with all these governments is that ultimately it's going to be private sector job growth that really will improve the economic situation and sort of stabilize the situation. If people have good jobs, they're going to be less likely. They'll want to stay in their home countries, and it'll provide that sort of longer term stability. So we want to partner with the private sector. We think there's some real opportunities for public-private partnerships, for foundations, for others. And I think we want to think creatively and outside the box. And again, I don't want to get ahead of the interagency. We're looking at this with a number of our colleagues in a very rigorous way. But I think it is a national security imperative for the United States to drive job growth in Central America. And I think despite some of the governance challenges and some of the complications that we have in our bilateral relations, I think you've got a young population that is eager to work in good jobs. And so, and then just the geography. The last thing I'll say on this, Kelly, is really the geography. Central America is very close to the U.S. That's why we're so intertwined. That's why our economies and our history is so intertwined. And I think that really puts some of these countries in a unique spot. And obviously, Central America has to compete against the whole world and against Asia and other places, and then within the hemisphere as well. But I think there are the elements here with a sustained focus, high level from the United States, with some of the assistance that we're going to provide, with some of the improvements we're going to work toward governance, and then partnering with the private sector and really convincing folks that there are some great investment opportunities in Central America. I think we can really make a change and coming out of COVID, have a real boom in these countries that would help stabilize the situation.
I love that. I mean, and coming from the private sector, delighted to work with the State Department and the other USG entities in that effort. It's critically important. I'll pivot maybe, Maria, to you. I mean, your background is so unique in that you've worked at the Embassy of Guatemala. You obviously work in the Senate now. Your boss, Senator Cassidy, is very committed to Central America, specifically to the Northern Triangle. We'd love to just get your view on, and just keying off of what Patrick said, I mean, why is this so important? Why is this a real national security imperative for the United States to get these relationships right?
Thank you. First of all, thank you to WITA for the invitation. I am honored to be here and be able to give you a little bit of my thoughts and share some of Senator Cassidy's priorities as well. So first of all, obviously COVID was a wake-up call for all of us, from the way we do trade to the way that we conduct our foreign affairs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm excited to hear that the State Department is highly focused on continuing to engage robustly with the Central American countries. As Patrick said, I mean, we're interconnected, and I don't want to repeat everything he said about the the geographical proximity, et cetera, but there's one key element as well, and it's our influence on society in the Central American countries, and that they want to work with us. They follow our models. They follow, you have kids in rural areas that their dream is to come here because of that influence that we bring into these nations. So it's important that we value the trust and the strength in the relationship with the Central American countries, because we don't necessarily have that with other regions of the world. So that wake-up call is, there are allies who really want to work with us, who have the workforce ready, willing, and able to come and provide us with just an enormous amount of opportunities for investment. So it's an opportunity for us to take advantage of partnering with true allies, and allies that will bring not only a loyalty in a sense, but also just, a driving force that will eventually reduce migration. Senator Cassidy, he understands the strategic value of engaging with the Latin American countries, and particularly Central America and the Northern Triangle. His dream is to revive, the relationship between Louisiana and Central America, the trade relationship. He wants to bring prosperity to Louisiana, to the United States, to the region, because this prosperity will reduce migration. It will help curb the corruption that, we've been following corruption and trying to figure out how to do it. But at the end of the day, if people can make money or have jobs with the right opportunities, the need to engage in illicit activity will sort of come down, and the need for our, for youth to migrate to the United States, for that dream of that, kid from a rural area in Guatemala to come to the US to build a house for his mom, we'll be able to make that dream become, oh, wait, let's move to Guatemala City and let's have let's get a job there, and then we can provide for our family, right? So his ultimate goal is, prosperity, economy, the impact that it'll have on national security, also less dependence on other countries that are farther out in the world, a reduction in the sale of counterfeit goods. There's so many things that can come from adequately using CAFTA as a tool in our toolbox and implementing the good rules that we already have there, that it's just, we would be missing an opportunity if we don't highly focus on re-engaging with Central America and engaging with them as partners, as economic partners. I think my key takeaway from my time in the Senate and from my time in the embassy and from working in the private sector in Guatemala and from handling migration and, going to rural areas, going to see kids that are here at the border, is there's more value in an robust economic relationship than just extending foreign aid. So I really like the fact that State Department is looking at the foreign aid perspective, but also the economic perspective, because the sustainability comes from the jobs that we generate and from that workforce having the skills necessary the jobs and the skills necessary to remain home.
Yeah, at the end of the day, people just want a job, they want to be safe. And that's why, frankly, it's the simplest thing in the world, but it sometimes can be the hardest thing to deliver on. And Maria, your boss has been such a leader on exactly those issues that you highlighted: combating illicit trade expansion, creating, opportunities, economic opportunities for our allies in Central America. Of the various policy tools that are out there, what does he see as the top priority? What does he think will give the United States the most bang for the buck, if you will, as we're looking at how to ensure that we are strengthening our relationships in Central America and the Northern Triangle and creating economic opportunity to the benefit of US national interests?
So we have CAFTA, right? That's our main tool that we can start utilizing at the moment. I think that one of the things that he greatly values is data sharing. We are at a point where we have been so effective in having robust trade, global robust trade, that at some point it becomes a little difficult to monitor. So there are, globally, there are so many transactions taking place that include so many actors, and it's really hard to have, a view of what that trade looks like, or what one simple trade transaction looks like. So that just leaves gaps and open spaces for, criminal enterprises, sophisticated criminal enterprises, because we have to think of them that way, to sort of sweep into our trade system and just, move their money around and make it seem like it's a legitimate trade transaction. So I think one tool is trade and enhancing the possibilities of what we can do with CAFTA. Another tool is our foreign foreign direct investment, another tool is enhancing customs and giving our partners the possibility of also being active in tracking, trade transactions. And one thing that I love about the Bush Center is the digitalization part that they're doing, because it's necessary. There's absolutely so much happening in the world, and we need to be able to see it. Otherwise, we just leave open gaps for a lot of criminal activity to take place.
Thank you so much, Maria. And that's a great tee up, Matt, for you. And not just because of your gray hair, but you're going to give us the historical context a little bit here. I mean, as we look at various chapters in U.S. policymaking, what can we learn? And I know you have looked at this extensively there at the Bush Center. And I referenced NAFTA at the beginning. I mean, what did we see as far as the impact on both economic development and migration, if we look at US policies such as NAFTA, such as the Haiti Hope Act, where economic development was really the goal?
So great series of questions, and thank you, Kelly, for that segue and for the earlier introduction. Thank you to WITA and Ken Levinson and the team for organizing this event, which is very topical and very timely. And I think I owe a particular debt of thanks to Maria for making half of my presentation for me. Let me start with a comment on the root causes piece, because that's where the debate is focused, and rightly so. And my former colleague Patrick Ventrell made a great series of points on that topic. And I agree with him. I don't want to quarrel with you, Patrick. I agree at one level that the problem is complex. At another level, however, it's quite simple. It is a demographic bulge that is taking place in this region. Demographic bulges are always disruptive to politics and to economics, and particularly in a region like Central America, where the demographic bulge happened to take place at a moment before those societies and economies had made their full transition from a sort of commodities-based economy to more of a entrepreneurship, innovation, ideas-based economy. And so that has produced a situation where you have large numbers of young people getting out of school in all of those countries and not finding job opportunities. So I think that the kind of keystone in the arch is, how do you get investment to flow into those countries to produce those job opportunities? Ultimately, that's the source of wealth, and that's the source of stability. So that is a complex problem. Maria's right. We have looked at this from the point of view of the Bush Center with the help of a network of thought leaders from the Northern Triangle countries that we began to bring together about almost 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And when we asked them in sort of an organized way, why don't these countries produce more job opportunities? The answer that came back was quite simple: corruption, and corruption's handmaiden, which is informality, informal job relationships, informal corporate relationships. And when we then pushed, kind of like, well, how do you fix a corruption problem? Where are there examples of countries that have gotten out in front of a corruption problem, and how did they do it? It's a very short list. But the common denominator is digital services to clean up transactions between the citizen and the government, to clean up and reduce the cost of accessing financial services. And that can have an enormous impact. And I think the Central American countries have got a great starting point for pursuing digital services. Digital services are widely used. Everybody's got a cell phone. So there's a basis of kind of consumer acceptance for these services. And I think a good signal from the governments and a good signal from the United States government would attract a lot of investment that would go a long way toward cleaning up the corruption problem. We think that signal should take the form of a bilateral agreement, an MOU or a freestanding agreement on digital trade that would help to foster the necessary reforms in Central America and lock them in a way that would make it more difficult for future Central American governments to walk away from them. The other thing, CAFTA has been mentioned. President Bush was obviously the political author of CAFTA while he was in the White House, and actually that commitment is one of the major reasons why the Bush Center is involved and has taken such an interest in this issue. We also think that there's a missing piece in the sense that CAFTA and USMCA, the successor to NAFTA, aren't linked. We think that if you could enable accumulation, in other words, if you could enable Central America originated content to be counted toward NAFTA content for purposes of duty-free access to the United States, you would send a very strong signal to the private sector that that link of the supply chains into Central America is something that the United States, Mexican, and Central American governments all want. And at a moment when a lot of investment is moving out of Asia, particularly out of China, and looking for a place from which to serve U.S. supply chains, I think you could capture a good bit of that investment. So those are, to us, those are two opportunities that the United States has relatively easily at hand. Accumulation can be done in consultation with the Mexicans and the Canadians in the form of an adjustment to the rule of origin under USMCA, and a digital trade agreement would be relatively easy to negotiate. We actually carried out a mock negotiation with our Central American friends, and I think I published a paper not long ago on this that points to the potential issues that would arise in such a negotiation, but also the potential benefits. So I think there's a significant partnership to be had there between the private sector and the Central American countries. And that the private sector is actually just kind of waiting for a signal like this before it increases. It's already a significant commitment to that region.
Yeah, no, Matt, I mean, because the bottom line is more FDI, it just helps, right, with the transparency piece. And one of the companies we've worked with for a long time is Walmart, that obviously does both sourcing and stores in Central America. And their journey's been really interesting because, just by virtue of being in the market, investing in the market, being present in the market, and bringing those, American values of transparency to the table, you automatically are kind of raising the level of not just the foreign investor community in the countries, but also the local business community. And it does create something of a virtuous circle. And I know, in one of your roles in government, you worked quite a bit on the private sector piece, bridging between the private sector and the USG for the Summit of the Americas process, et cetera. I mean, how do you see that private sector partnership working effectively in Central America? How can we partner best with policymakers like Maria, Patrick, et cetera?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. First of all, Walmart should be congratulated. I hope they're represented here today for its commitment to the region, and in particular for its commitment to digital services in the region. And when Walmart's programs to use digital forms of payment and to promote remittances and to make it easier for people to access their remittances is actually exemplary. And I think other Central American private sector actors, particularly in the financial sector, also have remarkable commitment to digital services, have deployed apps, and there's actually a level of online access to banking services, mobile access to banking services that is already fairly widely used in the region. So I think what the U.S. government could do really, the key thing I think is that the economies of the region are small. I looked at the numbers not long ago. The GDP of El Salvador is comparable to about a quarter of the GDP of the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan area. So that's a very small market. The United States government's role in encouraging those markets to get more closely integrated, that was one of the key achievements under CAFTA, actually, was to stimulate greater regional economic integration. That is one of the major things that the U.S. government can do. Those economies need to be bigger. And they need to grow, but they also need to integrate with one another. If they were fully integrated, the economy of Central America would be something that would attract the attention of a major American investor. And I think that's one of the keys to getting that investment to flow in there. Another key actually is domestic investment. There's a lot of corporate wealth in Central America that's parked outside the region, and so the signal of Central American investors investing more in their own region, I think, would be an important thing. The other thing that I think is crucial, it's not been part of this conversation so far, but the U.S. government has a longstanding commitment to integration of the electrical markets in the isthmus from Mexico down to Panama and ultimately all the way to Colombia. You have in Mexico and Colombia energy surplus zones in effect, and in Central America an energy deficit zone where electrical and power prices are much higher than in Mexico or the United States. That's a significant factor in the cost of all of these operations, and I think is one of the reasons why private investment doesn't flow smoothly into that region. And as I say, the United States government has a longstanding commitment to that process. It's had its fits and starts, but at the moments when the United States government focuses on it and promotes it, it moves forward more rapidly. So I would encourage the U.S. government to take another look at how it might promote the what's called CAPAC, the Central American Electricity Market Integration Process.
That's great, Matt. Thank you so much. I'm going to pivot now, Beth, to you. We really can't talk about CAFTA and CAFTA's promise from an economic development standpoint without talking about the textile sector. And obviously, AAFA was very involved in the support for CAFTA, the development of CAFTA, and really in the effort to ensure that the result of CAFTA was the economic development that the policy was designed to create. I think that if you look at the statistics as far as kind of how are we at 15 years in, unfortunately, textiles is one of those areas where we haven't really met the promise, right? You've seen pretty flat growth in that space, and maybe you could comment a little bit more on that. So I guess, my question to you would be, and I remember an economic development class I took at Georgetown, and I'll never forget the title of one of the articles that we read, and it was, "Why are the Emperor's New Clothes Not Made in Brazil?" So I guess my question to you is, why are the work from home yoga pants not made in Central America? What can we do to make this agreement more effective and to employ more Central Americans?
Thank you to WITA for having me today, and thanks for the questions, Kelly. As we see companies trying to diversify their sourcing out of China for various reasons, like the Section 301 tariffs or maybe human rights concerns, they're looking to other regions for capacity and capability. And why aren't they looking to a region like CAFTA? It should be a logical choice, but it's not as competitive as Asia, even with an FTA. So we're looking at this from a perspective of how can we make the CAFTA region more competitive? How can we make Western Hemisphere more competitive and integrated? And one of the ways we can do that is to update CAFTA. Like you said, it's 15 years old now. The data shows that CAFTA hasn't lived up to what we had hoped. Trade is flat, actually, since CAFTA has been enacted. We never saw that uptick that I think we were hoping for. In some years, actually, the trade has actually declined in some of these CAFTA countries. And so for us, when we were looking at this, one of the reasons we see, at least in the apparel sector, is that CAFTA has really restrictive rules of origin, and that requires that all the yarns and fabrics and sewing threads and other inputs be produced in the region for it to qualify for that duty-free treatment. So if those rules were updated to allow access to more globally produced yarns, we think that would actually drive capital investment in fabric production in the region. That would create jobs in certain sectors for the apparel industry. And then, again, creating jobs, folks will stay in country, and that could help ease that migration issue that we were talking about earlier. There are other ideas too. Matt mentioned accumulation. That's something we also support. There's other provisions within CAFTA, like the tariff preference levels that we could turn back on. And so there's a few ways that we could really update CAFTA to make it more attractive for companies to start producing more apparel in the region. And again, the ultimate goal is to drive that job growth. We also see that the region needs to be more integrated, and companies are looking to move closer to their customers or near shore, but there are really burdensome custom delays in countries in the CAFTA region. And so we're basically squandering that speed advantage that they would have, you would expect that they have because of the global proximity. We also need to update logistics pieces as well. We could work on the express delivery service, so more of the region can tap into that e-commerce trend that we've seen. It's actually, grown exponentially over the past year due to the pandemic. So basically more trade facilitation and better infrastructure for the region. So those are a few ideas that we have that we're working on and that we think that the would actually help grow the apparel industry in the region, but then also, create those jobs that are so desperately needed.
One of the things that I remember from working on CAFTA back in the day was there was this concept that given that we expected that apparel would be one of the areas that would really generate economic development and employment, that precisely because of the proximity piece that you're talking about, that it would be a hub for fast fashion. Can you talk a little bit just about why that didn't end up being the case?
Yeah, I think a lot of that goes back to, those restrictive rules of origin. There are over, I think, 1,500 tariff lines in just 2 chapters for apparel. But 80% of that CAFTA's apparel trade comes in just under 25 lines. So they're making basics in the region. But if we could open that up to more yarns, we would see more of a diversity of the fashion come from that region. There just isn't the yarns that folks, that companies need and look to, like there is in Asia, to make some of that, that those trending fashion pieces that we see right now. So again, if we could update CAFTA a bit, allow more of that, we'll see a lot more, I think, of the fashion pieces that, you want to go to the store and buy, or you want to buy online, come from the region, actually.
Okay, so it's kind of the type of the fabric then.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, no, that's interesting. One other question, if you can speak a little bit to infrastructure. I mean, if the industry, because I remember that was another issue that we really, pondered, 15 years ago was, would the infrastructure be able to meet the enhanced, what we hoped, and maybe it hasn't fully met the promise yet, but what we hoped would be enhanced FDI and in the region and job creation. And I'm wondering, and Patrick, I may pivot back to you if maybe, IFI, international financial institution funding might play a role on that infrastructure piece. But Beth, I don't know if you have any comment on that, just off the top of your head.
Yeah, no, there is a working group that works with, it's the COAC working group. It works with Customs and Border Protection. And they've actually have several recommendations on infrastructure that they think would be helpful. And so unfortunately the pandemic happened, so some of those couldn't be realized. But yeah, we're sharing those ideas. But I think if we are able to get that trade facilitation, better infrastructure in the region, folks would really be able to tap into that, and those logistics and customs issues might be fixed in such a way that it would be easier for companies to do business down there. But yeah, probably Patrick has some more on infrastructure.
Yeah, the IDB, World Bank, I'm not sure, that might be interesting to hear a bit about, Patrick, if there's any discussions going on there.
Thanks so much. Yeah, infrastructure is absolutely critical. And I think there are some serious long-term needs. I think it's also, we have to have the infrastructure discussion, as you mentioned, in the context of climate change too. In a place like Honduras, where you've had major damage, are we going to build back in a way that's going to make the infrastructure more resilient, and take the opportunities as we make these infrastructure investments to do them in a way that's more sustainable across what we anticipate will be more climate contingencies. So those two issues are interrelated. We're definitely in discussions to try to generate a push for greater infrastructure investment. We have not only some of the IFIs, but also DFC as a tool that the U.S. government can tap into. And so I think those are going to be critical. And I just want to, while I have the opportunity to say absolutely sort of endorse this notion of greater regional integration on the economic front, that's going to be key. Some of the issues about customs. And again, there was and is this broader vision of a greater economic zone here that's not been fully realized. And so that's something that we'll have to take a hard look at it, see what we can do to, and again, that could be back to infrastructure as well. If we make investments on one side of a border, it's got to be all interconnected.
No,
Thanks.
Absolutely. Matt, you have something to add?
Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, I think this is a really important and exciting conversation because what I hear us saying is these are opportunities to open. These are ways the United States could open new opportunities for entrepreneurship and growth driven by investment in these regions. My concern is that, in my experience, debates about rules of origin or adjustments to trade agreements, or certainly accumulation, very quickly sort of bogged down in the specifics and the arcana of trade policy. And so, Patrick, without meaning to put you on the spot, you mentioned, I think, at the outset that this was sort of an overriding national priority for the United States. How can this group, either the panelists or the audience assembled here this morning, how can we help make sure that these sort of relatively arcane ideas survive the interagency process and make their way onto the administration's agenda?
Yeah, good. Thanks so much. And again, obviously from the State Department, we look at the broad national security strategy, but we are working closely with the interagency, and I think it's important that all views are heard. And I think we're really just ramping up on the economic sort of pillar of the strategy right now. So I think the timing is opportune for folks to make their voices heard, and we'll run a process in close consultation with the NSC and the NEC economic staff, and definitely want to make sure that not only some of the short-term things we can do to make CAFTA work better, but the broader perspective. What are we doing out over a longer time horizon too? I think it is important to share. So we welcome views.
And I should say, if I might, Kelly, sorry, thank you, Patrick, to you and your colleagues for your openness to us and to our ideas and to consultations. I think that's been exemplary, the way you all have handled the process, and I just congratulate you for that. And as I say, would like to put myself at your disposal, and I suppose I can speak for many people present here this morning, to continuing that process and making it effective. I appreciated your comment that you were willing to look at new ways of doing things, and a lot of the ideas that have been put forward here this morning, I think, do represent new ways of thinking about these things. And so if we can help make sure that those things survive the leveling grind of the interagency process, we're happy to do that.
100%. No, we're here, and Maria for the Hill as well. I mean, it's the politics of Central America have always been complicated, but this is so important. We just absolutely have to get this right. Do you have a final comment, Maria, before we turn to questions?
Yes. So there are a number of senators and congressmen that are interested in doing something positive, and it's from both sides, and it's a bipartisan, bicameral interest in getting things right. So with the efforts of the private sector and the right members on the Hill, on the right committees, I mean, there might be an opportunity to do something that's really beneficial for all of us. So, and obviously my boss is his dream is to be one of the leading voices for Central American countries and to bring prosperity and to the region. So our office is also a resource, and feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be as helpful as possible.
We're grateful for that. Thank you. Ken, off to you.
Thank you. Really terrific conversation, and love that we've covered so much ground. We have some really interesting questions that have come in from the audience. I'm going to try to consolidate a couple of them. Folks, if you're watching, we still have time to submit a few more using the Q&A tab on Zoom. So I'm going to combine a couple broader picture questions that are in the chat for the whole group, and hope that you all will choose to weigh in where you feel appropriate. First one, ask some kind of questions about America's intentions in the region going back over the past 60 or 70 years, a whole history of U.S. efforts to intervene in the political developments in Central American countries, that have had some long-term and perhaps, I think some would say negative impacts on the whole region. That's sort of one question, commenting on American involvement in the region and our intentions today. And then there's a sort of a positive spin to that, which is there a way to mainstream a more human-centered approach to some of these economic and security engagement strategies of the U.S. towards Central America in a way that puts human dignity at its core? I know they're very broad questions, but curious if folks would want to weigh in. Matt, maybe we could kick off with you.
Sorry, thank you. So one perhaps self-serving comment from the point of view of the Bush Center. We totally agree on the human nature, the human core that's present here, and the real reason why these issues are so complex is because they involve individual people trying to secure their life, liberty, and trying to pursue happiness. So one of the things that we've done, and actually that President Bush has done, is maybe everybody knows this already, but President Bush, has taken up portrait painting in his retirement, and has recently painted a series of portraits of immigrants, which are on display in our building here in Dallas for the rest of the year, and will then go on tour. And the book, the coffee table book of these portraits, will be on sale early next week, specifically with the objective of humanizing this debate and pointing out, some of these portraits are people you've heard of. Many of them are people that you haven't heard of. The cashier in the office building where President Bush's personal office is, for example, who's an immigrant from Ethiopia. So the idea is to humanize the question, because I think something does have to be done about that, because we are talking here about individual people, and so that's a legitimate sort of objection to the high policy conversation that we're having today.
Patrick?
Yeah, thanks. And I saw these questions in the chat and sort of the consolidation. I absolutely agree. And I think, promoting the respect for human rights, labor rights, that's going to be at the center of what we're trying to do right now with our policy. And I think some of the things the administration is looking to do in terms of migration management in a humane way is going to be at the center of what we're doing. And I think, again, we're trying to provide opportunities and the conditions for a brighter future for the populations in these countries. Look, on the historical question, you can go back decades and look at sort of the complex intertwined U.S. history. You could go back centuries. And some of these are deeply historical and complex problems. What I can say is looking forward, we're doing everything we can to promote better governance, improve and help empower our foreign partners to deliver on the needs of their citizens and their societies. And what I would say, and what I was with Special Envoy Ricardo Zuniga when we were in El Salvador last week, we're looking for society to society relationships. This is not just a government to government kind of plan. We're looking to these are societal to societal plans. And I think we've got a positive vision. It's hard. I won't underestimate, I don't want to downplay the complexity of the historical challenge here, but we're looking forward in a positive way.
And I think, Patrick, it reminds me of when I was a student at UCR, University of Costa Rica in the late 80s, and I traveled to Nicaragua, and I have a wonderful photo album of anti-American murals throughout Nicaragua from my time there. Fast forward, and now, countries want U.S. investment. And so, that for me, and that's why for me, just personally, it was so meaningful to work on and be supportive of CAFTA and to be part of this conversation here today, because that's the calling card, right? We're you all are the real diplomats, but as the private sector, hopefully we're carrying U.S. values and transparency and all of that forward in a way that really, bonds us, like Maria was saying before, in a way that makes the U.S. Central America relationship very unique and very, very close.
Can I have?
Yes, please, Maria.
So when we think about the CAFTA region and we compare it or Central America, and we compare it to other countries, at the end of the day, we're looking for a success story, right? As we've had with other Latin American countries. And we can't have that success story without understanding the history, learning from mistakes that were made, and at the same time, looking forward in a positive manner. So if we have CAFTA and we want a success story, we can't ignore the human dignity side of it, because that is going to be the ultimate success for people either to remain home and have dignified jobs, or for people who, you know, migrate in a legal manner to come here and have, you know, a strong relationship, form strong relationships and ties in the United States. So the questions are appreciated, and if not asked, then we're not, you know, if we're not focused on them, then we're doing ourselves a disservice, because we have to look at it holistically and understand that the history comes with the current situation, and we need to attack it, or our approach needs to focus on what we can do to make the relationship better, and what we can do to make the Central American countries be able to be at a level playing field where we're partners, where we're striving for the same goals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
You know, sort of a related question that comes in, again, combining a couple of the threads of the question. We are all talking here, I understand Matt's in Texas and the others of us are in the DC area, but we're still talking from the United States about this. Obviously, we could have another session on here hearing from Central Americans, and we should be doing that. And Maria, of course, you are from the region. What are they saying? You know, and I know, Patrick, you're talking to them probably daily, if not many times a day. What are we hearing from them about what would be needed? You know, the governance issues are a big issue that we focus on. What are they saying are things that would be helpful for them in that? You know, is it capacity building assistance? You know, there's issues of rule of law, there's security questions. That's what we're hearing in the news a lot these days about the migration problems. What else are there other things that the United States, and what should we be doing as a community to listen to what the needs are of that region? Patrick?
Yeah, good. Yeah, and we're in close discussion not only with the foreign governments, but with a variety of actors from civil society and the private sector in all of the countries. Look, all those issues are there. I think there's a top-down and a bottom-up kind of way of looking at things. Some things that Matt talked about, where we're looking at better digital governance, reducing corruption. That way, I think, is going to be sort of a key aspect that folks are looking at, and that will improve the business environment. But there's a top-down element of sort of the predictability that folks are looking for better governance, and that's come across clearly. Certainly, there's been security concerns and others, and those are all interrelated. But the one that comes across most clearly, I think, are improving governance. And I think coming out of the pandemic is where we have a real opportunity as investment decisions will be made. And I think if some of these governments, if some of these societies, if some of these private sector actors make some of the right decisions, and I think civil society and the private sector want to help. Improving governance isn't easy, and it isn't just in the hands of governments or sitting governments. It's in the hands of societies. And so I think what we want to do from the United States is help empower all of those actors. And to the extent that the private sector can take a role in doing that too, that's bienvenido, very welcome. So I think those are the clear things that are coming across in our initial consultations. And we're looking to empower actors who, want to lay the conditions, whether it's from the top down or the bottom up, that will sort of improve the investment climate.
So just
Maria, please.
one quick comment. I completely agree that it's extremely important to listen to governments, to the private sector, to civil society. At the end of the day, they are the ones who best know the country needs and who best know how to navigate the legal systems, how, what impacts will certain policies have on certain sectors. So just encourage WITA that this conversation needs to take a further step and start listening to those actors as well. I've lived in Guatemala, I've worked at the embassy, and there's only so much that you can do in Washington, but then you have to go back. And I'm speaking specifically to the Guatemala case, but governments are only in for 4 years, right? So how much can you really get done? This needs to, when we look at in general at the region, we need to think long-term and what is sustainable with whoever is in power. And I think that that's where the digitalization piece comes in. And that's where, robust trade agreements are so helpful, that just to say, encourage the participation of the countries as well.
And I think from my perspective, and I might be biased because I'm a huge Ricardo Zuniga fan, but I mean, just putting a diplomat of his stature in that position of, that is his 24/7 job, and, is making sure that we are getting those relationships right, that he's, been in the last 3 weeks down there twice, right, Patrick? I mean, so this is something God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? That I think, at least in my estimation, that the U.S. government is trying to get right.
If I could, I think I agree with all that. And I also welcome Ricardo's role. I think it's a smart move by the administration, and looking at the press from the region, it's obviously played really well. However, the concern that's alluded to here in the questions, and that was alluded to in your question, Ken, is legitimate, which is the United States government, let's face it, those of us who've had firsthand experience with it, tends to talk more than it listens. And so creating opportunities to empower the voices from the region, I think, actually is critical to success. And you could, I think, probably go back and build a case that all the reasons why the U.S. government has failed in its objectives in the past is for failure to listen effectively to regional voices. My own approach to our Central America project was specifically that. And the working group that we pulled together was Central American thought leaders, very wide perspectives, very wide number of perspectives. And the proposal that we put forward in their name to promote digitization actually emerged from that conversation. It wasn't my preconception going in. I didn't actually have a preconception going in as to what the focus of the program should be. So I think that's actually, I'm obviously proud of having done that, but I also think that that's an important thing to keep in mind as we talk to the region.
Thank you. And we certainly hope to be a place where we can listen some more to these ideas. I want to tie back before we close to a couple kind of trade specific questions, maybe bring Beth back into the conversation as well. We've talked about updating CAFTA. Is there a model? Are there lessons to be learned from the modernization of NAFTA with the U.S. Mexico-Canada agreement, USMCA? The worker right provisions in that agreement were certainly identified by many who voted for the new USMCA, and it's very strong bipartisan support in the U.S. Congress. Is that something that can be replicated in ways in Central America in updating CAFTA so that we can get the kind of support in Congress that we need? And sort of another question, Beth, that came in, the role of China in the region, but it was a broader question, but specifically, if we do more, allow more yarn from global sources, is there an ability to weed out, pun intended, I guess, Shenzhen cotton in the region if we were to allow more yarns?
Great, thanks. I'll take that last question first. I think we can definitely allow more globally produced yarns, but of course, our member companies are going to continue their robust efforts to keep products made with forced labor out of their supply chains, and that's a given. So allowing CAFTA to have access to alternative yarn suppliers could also promote, that there's diversified yarn suppliers outside of China. And so there are several other countries where they could get, their yarn besides China, like Korea, Japan, Vietnam, etc. So I think, there's definitely ways that we can do that without utilizing forced labor cotton. And just going back to USMCA and updating CAFTA, I think, we don't want to reopen this agreement like we did with NAFTA. I think we can make changes within the agreement and with our trading partners without having this big opening of the agreement. And so, we can definitely look at other programs like Haiti Hope, for example. They're allowed to use, they're allowed to accumulate, and with all of the USFTA partners and with all of the other preference partners to make the qualifying apparel. So we can be creative on how we develop those flexibilities, but we definitely think that will incentivize trade and job growth as well.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that front? Matt?
If I might, thank you. I do think the concern is legitimate. The provisions, the labor provisions under CAFTA were the gold standard of their day 15 years ago. I think we have to look at the experience of labor organization in the region, in particular the sort of test case that was carried out in Guatemala under those provisions in the last decade, and see that those have proven not to be as effective as they were sold to be in the process of negotiating CAFTA. So we'll see if the approach under USMCA is superior to that. But I do think that some form of heightened authority in that area is probably going to end up being necessary, whether it takes the form of an add-on to CAFTA or a revision of CAFTA. I share Beth's hesitation about reopening CAFTA, but I do think there are things you could do without necessarily reopening CAFTA that we should consider doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe I have scars from all the USMCA rounds I participated in, but I think in this, the need is so urgent, right? I mean, we see what's happening at the border, and we really need to think about, what can we do that's actionable, that's less painful, that's faster, that can allow us to have a real impact on economic development, and think differently, think creatively about that, just given the urgency of the current situation.
Thank you all very, very much. We are past our bewitching hour. I apologize. There were a couple of questions still in the queue that we weren't able to get to. We'll forward those questions to our panelists so they can see what was asked and if there's any opportunity for follow-up in that. Thank you very much, Kellie. You're a great friend and partner personally and with WITA. Thank you. Matt, a pleasure to be connected with the Bush Center. We hope to have the opportunity to work together. Beth, AAFA is also a long time and deep partner with WITA. Thank you for joining us. Maria, a pleasure to have you on the WITA stage. We hope to have more opportunities to work with you. And Patrick, thank you so much to you and your team who we've been working with on helping put this event together. They've been incredibly helpful and a pleasure to work with. Thank you. We wish all of you, and I'm going to focus this on Patrick, best of luck in all you're doing. There's so much on the table, including helping get Central America off, work with Central America and dealing with some of these critical issues, including COVID, which is also something that is a global problem that we can't just solve by within the borders of the United States. So, which is also related to a question that came in. So thank you all very much. Look forward to hosting you again. Thanks to our audience for joining us. We hope to see all of you again soon. Everyone be safe, take care, and get the shot.